Hello, wonderful. This is Sarah, and I'm here with Sarah. Sarah K Ramsey here with Sarah Schneider, and she, get this, is the good girl dismantler, okay, which I just love. And she's also an executive leadership coach, and she's going to bust up our idea of what being a good girl means. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hey, Sarah, I'm good. I'm excited to be here. I love talking to other Sarahs, and I also appreciate what you're up to in the world.
Well, you also spell your name correctly, right? Sarah with an H.
It is the end age discussion, H or no H.
Yes, so I was named after Sarah Crew from the book The Little Princess.
Oh, wow.
Which doesn't have an H, so I'm not sure how my mother came up with the H.
Yeah.
Or why she added that instead of spelling it the other way.
Yeah. It might even also just be like generational, or my mom named me after a great one of my grandmas, but her name actually, she was called Bertha, but Sarah was her given name. So that's how I ended up with my name, and it was spelled with an H.
That is really unfortunate that her name was Sarah and they went with Bertha. Right? Like, how sad for her. But anyway, we digress, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so what does it mean? I love this idea of being a good girl mantler, because we get these ideas in our head of good girls don't ask, good girls follow the rules, good girls are nice. You know, some of these things that are costing women financially and relationally.
Yeah.
Right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, someone actually helped me come up with the idea of good girl, or even what I used to have on my website. I don't anymore, but this idea of toxic brew, which is what when Julie had sent over your podcast, at first I was like, well, I don't really work with people specifically on a toxic relationship, but then, or a person, but then I started thinking about it. I was like, yes, but I work with people, especially women, on toxic conditioning and the toxic things that really, this idea of this toxic brew that makes up how we make decisions, who we choose to be with in our life, the how we lead, the work that we do. Like, it's just infused in everything. And so I hired someone at the time to get what was in my head and then articulate it in a way that would resonate. And really, she was like, well, it seems like, because I was talking about people pleasing, I was talking about, I work with really strong women that if you were just to witness or be with, you would not think that that they lack confidence or are trying to please people or want to be liked. Like a lot of the stuff that plays out in their head, you wouldn't know that by just being with them, but that plays out in my head too, right? Like I consider myself a strong, confident woman, and I've navigated all that stuff as well. So that's where it started, was like she really helped me pull out, like, hey, that actually sounds like the good girl stuff that we're taught when we're really young. And I was like, yep.
So what are some good girl lessons that you've seen cost women later in life?
Yeah. Such a great question. And I do believe that it starts young, and I don't necessarily think it's because people have said to me, or like I've never been called a good girl. Like, nobody's literally been like, oh, Sarah, you're such a good girl. Like, if anything, it's been the opposite. So it's not people running around being like, oh, you're a good girl, you're not a good girl. It's all those other messages, things like be quiet, don't talk too much, or why aren't you talking more, right? Like Susan Cain wrote a book called Quiet. In that, she talks about how our education system is designed for wants people to talk more, be a part of more, right? Like, it's not actually designed for, well, at least it used to not be designed for different, personalities. So I think things like that, talk more or talk less, take up space, don't take up too much space.
So it's really, what I hear you saying is double binds.
Yeah.
Right? So if you do this, you're too much or not enough, too loud, too quiet, too bossy to not assertive enough, right? So putting females in those double binds, right? And then also, like, imagine as you were talking, it's like there's you, and then there's another chair, and whoever's sitting in that other chair gets to make the rules for you, right? Like, this is who you should be. That's kind of what I was envisioning in my mind as you were talking. Does that align with what you're saying?
It's a great visual for it. It's the idea that there's especially as we're growing up, like, hey, I think I like this. I
Mhm.
think this interests me.
Mhm.
I think this might be who I am. These are my values. This is what's important to me. Like, you start developing those things, but then, to use your analogy, that then there's this person or this culture or this family motto or identity or whatever country you grow up in, right? Like, then there's all of that in the chair across from you saying, well, but this is what you're supposed to do. You're
Mhm.
supposed to go to college. You're supposed to get married. You're supposed to have kids. You're, supposed to do this. You're supposed to do that. Like, so it's all of those messages and conditioning in the chair opposite you. And then that's when self-doubt creeps in. And then,
But it's self-doubt too, because I think I described one chair, but so often there's like two or three chairs.
yeah.
And that's where I see women stuck in indecision. Like, they're wanting to make the right decision. And chair one says this is right. Chair two says this is right. Chair three says this is right. And I see women get stuck in this like panicked decision making because they're trying to do the right thing by following the rules, asking other people's opinions, doing this type of thing to feel secure. Okay, I'm doing the right thing because everyone agreed. But then everyone doesn't agree, and it becomes decision fatigue. Is that what you've seen?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the right thing, because I think that's also part of the messaging is like, get it right, take care of other people, things like that. And we end up making then, so all those chairs, everybody has an opinion. I mean, that's what I've come to learn in my lifetime, is even people that I don't care if they have an opinion, everybody has an opinion. And even things that we say is truth or fact, or even experts, right? Like, it's still their uh, opinion in a lot of things. People who we know, like, and trust and look to for information, sometimes it's still their opinion about things. And so I think we get all this information, and then what you pointed to is all these different decisions. And when self-doubt, the louder self-doubt is, the more inclined we are to look to other people to tell us what to do.
Mhm.
And we forget that we typically know what's right for us, but we've
Mhm.
just gotten so used to other people's voices, opinions, messages.
And I want to point out that most people are defending their own choices in telling you what to do with your choices. If you have this is an easy example, though I hate to use this example because it's like a female podcast, I'm talking about mothers. But if you have like a working mother, she may say, how dare you like not show your kids what it's like to have a job and a career, and then you have the stay-at-home mom who might says, how dare you steal all that time away from your children, not make them a priority, right? They're both defending their own choices and giving their opinion of what you should do based on defending their own choices and identities.
Yeah. And I think that's the risky thing about outsourcing our decisions.
I love that language, outsourcing your decision. Whew, say it again, Sarah.
It's outsourcing our decisions. And I do that too sometimes, where I'm like, I see these different options in front of me. I don't know what to do. I'm scared to choose, because then if I choose, I have to risk something, so I sometimes do this as well. But typically when I'm outsourcing my decisions, I end up back to what I knew to be true for me anyway. And I just spent a whole bunch of time for someone to tell me what to do.
Mhm.
Um, but outsourcing our decisions, there we end up then being, to your point, at really tied to what somebody else's fears are.
Uh-huh.
Like, I think we can understand a lot about somebody's choices and decisions if we can understand their fears. And I think that's true for anything. When people are like, why does somebody stay in a relationship? Like, it's obvious they shouldn't. It's like, well, okay, but have you
Mhm.
taken the time to really understand the person that's staying's fears? Like, do you
Mhm.
really understand that? Or, and I do most of my work around leadership with women, but when people make certain decisions for their company or for their teams or in their life, well, do you understand their fears? And the same is true of we're getting people's opinions. It's like, well, yeah, some people might judge what a mom is doing, but that may not work for the other person. So I think we really have to remember that a lot of times people's opinions, even if they don't mean to, even if they have the best intention with what they're saying to you, is steeped in their experience, which may be very different than your own and what's important to you.
Well, it's easy to make decisions we are not emotionally attached to.
Yeah.
Right? It's easy to tell you should, quit that job because that boss is no good for you when you've been at the company for 20 years because we're not emotionally attached to other people's decisions.
Yep.
Right. So how do you work with women to get out of this good girl, destructive mindset, right? Because there's some pieces of being a good girl, I'm the quintessential good girl. You said you weren't. I was a pastor's kid who, on my senior trip, instead of going partying with my friends, went to an orphanage and worked the orphanage. I was like the quintessential good girl in a sickening way that did not serve me. It did not serve me either. It kind of destroyed my life quite a bit. But bouncing back from that, but how do you get women out of that mindset of it's really important to do the right thing for everyone else other except for me?
Yeah. Well, and I love that you put in the point of like, this isn't about taking some of the things that are under, the good girl umbrella and then making ourselves wrong for it. Caring about other people, being sympathetic and compassionate about other people's worlds, wanting to be of service in the world, wanting to do good, wanting to have an impact, wanting people to be cared for, wanting to be kind, right? Like those aren't character defects. And so I think it's understanding that there are aspects of who we are that allow us to have the good things in the life that we do and um be with people the way that we want to be. So it's not like, oh no, I recognize that in myself. Now let me beat myself up for it and like be cruel to myself because that sucks too. So I think I love that you pointed to that. So part of it is like, yeah, some of these things actually work for us. They allow us to navigate the world in a way that we want to. And I worked in the male-dominated IT field for a long time, and some of that conditioning helped me uh, stay safe,
Yeah.
stay to blend in, but also stand out just enough to get promoted. Like there was, in a lot of ways, our conditioning we might have needed at some points in our life to be safe. So I think all of this is, first and foremost, please don't, anybody beat themselves up if they recognize any of this in themselves. And then to answer your question, as far as disrupting it and dismantling it, I think the first thing is to recognize it. It's like anything. Once we see something, we can't unsee it. So it's
Mhm.
really recognizing, oh, is this what I actually believe? Are these my values? Is this what I think is best for me? Is this who I am? Or are these is this something I heard as a kid? Is this something the media taught me? Is this something the Disney movies taught me? And that's no knock to, I love me some Disney sometimes, but
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
are these
You know, the best way to find a prince is to give up your voice. What?
exactly.
Every beast
Exactly.
handsome prince? What? No. Yeah, we have some serious conditioning issues.
Exactly. If I just lay here and sleep, some stranger will creepily come kiss me. It's like,
Yeah,
uh, yeah. So
exactly. No, exactly. Yeah.
yeah, so it's part of, like I said, the first part of it is really recognizing it. Like, is this true for me, or is this something I've likely picked up over a lifetime of messaging? So once you can understand that some of that conditioning runs through us from a very young age, we can start to see it separate from us, not make ourselves wrong for it, but we can see it as something outside of us. Oh, I actually have a choice here. This is who I say I am, or this is who society says I am. Which one will I choose? So that's the first piece. And then if recognizing it is helpful, but it's often not enough to shift it over a longer period of time. So what I suggest is then we also get to reinvent the messages. And so I do that a lot around leadership specifically, but you could do that in any area. And what I mean by that is, if we use leadership as an example, textbooks, movies, TV, media, there's a lot of what traditional leadership should look like. And often it's not what we look like, or it's not a title or a status or a high paying job, right? You can be on the PTA and be a leader. Like, you can be a leader of your household, or you can be a CEO of a company.
And we have to be leaders of ourselves, which I'm sure you talk about, right? And that's where, when we advocate our own leadership by having the 3 chairs, by having, or maybe for my listeners, you have the toxic voice on the throne, whether that be your mother or ex or current husband or whatever else, you have the toxic person on the throne screaming. And it's that integrity of learning to lead yourself rather than just advocating your voice all the time to that toxic voice.
For sure. Self-leadership is, I think, is one of the fundamental places to start, because then when we have that in place, then of course we can lead other people and other things and other situations. So self-leadership, absolutely. And so part of that then is defining. So if the status quo definition of leadership doesn't work for you, and it doesn't work for a lot of people, then it's redefining it.
Okay.
So what does leadership mean? What does success mean to you? What does being in a powerful romantic relationship mean to you? What does relationship with family mean, right? Like, you actually, any of us at any time can redefine what it is for us outside of the conditioning. So that's an important.
I will say something really important to that. So outside of the conditioning, not outside of the rules. And I love that you use that language of conditioning, because I think as a good girl, it's like, well, I'm trying to follow the rules. And to differentiate, no, I'm trying to follow the conditioning, kind of already starts opening the door to give you permission to change and to create change without it being wrong. Does that align?
It's a great reframe. Sometimes I forget about the following the rules, because one, that's a lot of, I mean, if you give me a rule book, my natural instinct is going to be like, look through it and make sure I get it all right, which is hilarious, because people who know me are like, but Sarah, you're kind of rebellious about things. I'm like, right, but I have to choose that. My natural inclination is to take that rule book, learn it all perfectly, and make sure I get it all right. And then I have to be like, well, hang on. Who made these rules?
Yeah.
These rules don't really align with who I say I am or who I want to be. These rules don't actually work for the way I want to navigate this world. So which ones am I going to throw out? Which ones am I going to redefine? Right? Like, that's the process that I go through, because I do have a rebellious nature, or I have a rebellious streak, but I have to choose that. And I think that's the case for I think about a lot of my clients, they're rocking the status quo in a lot of ways, but it takes something for them to do that, because it's scary.
And it is scary. And, within the conversation, there was somebody kind of rocking the rules of their religious community regarding toxic relationships. And I said, you know what? If women 100 years ago had done this, we wouldn't have to be fighting this so hard. But they didn't. There were some things they were doing within getting us the right to vote and all that kind of stuff. But like, think about the history of mankind. Like, 100 years ago is not that long, right? And, if women were redefining this, and, moving along some of these ways, we would not be having to fight as hard for equal pay, for a seat at the table, for our voices to be heard, for equality in relationships, right? And they didn't have those fights, or they weren't at a place where they didn't have the information, not blaming them. But to me, that empowers me in thinking about being willing to redefine, being willing to be a rebel, being willing to stand up, being willing to take a look at that rule book and make sure it fits.
Yeah. The way I heard you just say it back, I hear examining in that. Like there's a lot of examining, where do my beliefs come from? Where am I making my choices from? And it's okay wherever it's at. Sometimes we got to do what we got to do to, get through a season of our life. But there's also times where we can pause and say, hey, hang on, like, who is this actually for?
And who's it benefiting?
Yes, and who's benefiting is is a great question. Yes.
Yes, that's awesome. So, do you have a favorite strategy? Like, I know there's some my go-tos. I always pull them out of the toolbox. Do you have a favorite strategy for helping women create change within themselves?
That is also a good question. Like favorite, I gotta pick one.
Yes, I mean, good question.
It's like when somebody asks me what my favorite movie is, I'm like, don't ask me. So many. I think the thing I come back to often with my clients, whether it's somebody I've worked with for a month or years, and then often with myself, is coming back to taking inventory of my experiences, or in this case, if it's with a client, taking inventory of our experiences, taking inventory of our the things we've been through, the successes, the challenges, the good, the bad, taking inventory of the decisions that we've made, taking inventory of the things that we've overcome, taking inventory of our knowledge and wisdom, like just looking at all of it and not being stingy, right? Because the risky thing about doing inventory alone is that then we discount stuff. But without being stingy, taking inventory of all of those things, because what I have found with every single person I've ever done this with, including myself often, every single person I've ever done this with, when they can get how extraordinary it is that they've gotten to this point in their life with and have all the wisdom that they have, when they can get how extraordinary it is, they start to see that they can trust themselves. They start to see that they have resilience. They start to see that there is so much courage that they have shown over their lifetime, right? It allows them to get some altitude on their life and who they are, and really give them some power to take on what's next. And that exercise can take 5 minutes, it can take 10 minutes, or it can take an hour, right? It takes as long as you need it to. But that strategy I find is very helpful, because we often discount what we know. We discount our knowledge, we discount our experiences, we discount the things we've overcome because we lived it. We think it's, whatever. And it's like,
Well, you discount what's easy for us, right? Yeah. So when I started doing this podcast, people were like, "Oh, you're a really good interviewer." It's always like, "Oh, that's a really good question." I was like, "Oh, is it?" Like, I don't know. Like, it's just easy. Like, it's just easy. And when I've had some other people that were on my podcast and I said, "Ooh, can we do a podcast swap?" They're like, "No, I'm so intimidated by asking you questions because you're, and it's like, but I don't have to work at it. So I don't make it count. But all the things that I'm bad at, and there are plenty, it's like, oh, those things count because I have to work at them. But we all have things that come easy and naturally, and we all have things we have to work at. And it's hardly ever the things that we have to work. It's not our weaknesses that people are hiring us for, that they are promoting us for, that they are choosing us for, right? It's those strengths, those things that are easy. But if my sister, it's easy for her to make like this incredibly beautiful meal, and she goes to her, I'm not kidding, she goes to her yard and gets flowers that she's grown herself and creates like a centerpiece that in her yard. And I'm like, what? Like, I don't even know if I have milk right now. Like, that is so far from my area of expertise, but it's easy for her. And to me, that feels very, decorating her Christmas tree is just beautiful. It looks like something out of Southern Living. And I'm like, I don't even like this dang elves on the shelf. Like, I know I'm supposed to like put them out for the children and I can't find the elves on the shelf, but she would be obviously very intimidated if she had to like do what I do, and really recognizing that and like, what is easy for me, and recognizing that's not easy for everyone. It counts. You have to let it stick.
Yeah, that's I'm actually gonna add, like when I do that exercise with people, I'm actually gonna add say it the way that you just said it, because I think that's, if you don't mind,
I don't
I think that's the, like, hey, what are the things that you think are easy that we are forgetting to put in here, because that's the things don't have to be hard to count.
Yes, 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 yes. I agree completely. And I need to take inventory of that in my own life.
Yeah. And in fact, they're probably not hard anymore. They might have been hard once, or they might not have been as easy once, but after doing it for years and over time and cultivating that, because I would suspect even before you had a podcast, there were ways that you were in conversation with people, and there's a way that you talk to people and socialize and communicate that has lended itself well to podcasting.
Yeah, I almost, in my coaching thing, I thought about doing something about like making friends and making connections and like the art of the conversation, a little bit like how to win friends and influence people, but not stealing his stuff, because it's always been such a strength area for me. And honestly, one of the reasons I didn't do it, other than making people toxic person proof is my calling, is that it was so easy for me. And I thought, I'm not going to recognize the pitfalls that other people fall into. When I think about breaking apart my own good girlness and having to evaluate the world in a different way, that was a huge struggle. And so I understand other people's struggle, but when it's something that I'm naturally gifted in, it's like, well, why is that a struggle for you? That's easy, right? And as a coach, understanding that perspective, now it wouldn't be as big of a deal. I've evolved in my coaching, but early on, that was my concern is, well, if it's really easy for me, I may not identify with people it's not as easy for, and I may not be as good of a coach, rather than saying this was a real struggle and these are the things I did to overcome it. I knew I would think about it in a different way, but
Yeah.
But as far as what you're talking about, the inventory, I call it strength-based healing and leading with your strengths and coming in with what you're good at. We don't do it as women. We discount it completely. And we say, oh, Sally's good at, or my sister. I mean, and I've cried over the Christmas tree before. Like, I don't want this to appear like it's something light. Like, I literally wept when I was a single mom trying to put up the Christmas tree and thinking this is what my children were going to have to look at. It looks jank. I didn't have any money. It was my grandmother's old tree. It was broken. And so it was like falling off, and her old ornaments that didn't match anything in my house. And then I walked into my sister's house. It looked like Southern Living. As a mom, I put a lot of pressure on myself, right? It felt like I was failing my children. Like, it was very emotionally attached to me. And I'm sure there's things in my life that my sister goes, that looks so easy. How did she make that look so easy? And I think there's a lot of kindness that comes both in recognizing other people have different zones of genius and being okay with that, and then embracing your own zone of genius. Right?
Yeah, it's the, when you were talking about the difference of Christmas trees, I was thinking about the idea of comparison. And I think that's such a, not that everyone does it, but I know that's what makes social media risky for me. That's what makes all kinds of things riskier for me sometimes, because I can look at that and be like, oh, I should be doing this in my business, or oh, I should be doing this, or I should look like this, or, I don't have kids and I'm not married. That's not something that was ever in the part of my vision for my life. But I can tell you, I've been asked about it pretty much every month for most of my life. And now I have a different way of handling it. But there was a time where it was like, wait, like, does this make me less? Does it, and then even in leadership, right? Like, it just shows up everywhere. So the idea of again, if we take inventory, then our job is to take inventory and then not use that to compare, right? We can take our internal mean critic can take anything and turn it around on us. So I think part of the job is to take that inventory and then not go, yeah, but this person has a better tree. This person makes a better centerpiece. For me, it's you know, I am I'm a friendly person, but I'm not necessarily a super social person. Like I don't enjoy large groups. I will do it. But then I'm not somebody who goes somewhere and meets somebody every single time and then become my best friend. People that have like never met a stranger. That's not how I am naturally. And yet I know people who like literally are in line at Starbucks.
That would be me.
Yeah.
I was in St. Petersburg looking at dolphins and met this guy, started talking about the dog. And then he was in my podcast. And then I've gone back to St. Petersburg and hung out with he and his wife and my husband. Like that is like,
Yeah.
and beginning of COVID, that's how this podcast happened, because I was so used to having conversations with strangers. It was like an anxiety that it was not happening anymore. And that's when the podcast started, because I was like, I need strangers to talk to and have conversations with, anyway, so yes, you're talking about me. But then there's things you're going to be brilliant at that I have no business doing. I mean, we just all have different skill sets. Yep. And we all need those skill sets. We need each other.
Yeah, I do. I think that's what makes it, that's why, there's lots of coaches in the world and people are always like, and I refer, I do discovery sessions before I work with somebody and I refer out. My sister's also a coach. I refer people to her sometimes. I refer to other people and, people are always like, aren't you worried about, competition? And I'm like, I'm not as a coach because I have a very specific style and energy and I work with specific people and it like, I don't worry that people who are a fit for each other will work together and people aren't will get to go and work with other people that are a fit. So I think that's important too. Like there is enough to go around. Yeah. And the thing that you said about like there even some of the things that we're not great at serve us in ways. Like if I use the example of I don't really necessarily love big group or social settings, because I don't love that, I work with my clients one-on-one, which means that we get to know each other very well, very fast, because I don't love the surface level stuff. So I take that thing that I don't love about big groups and I apply it into the way I work. And that's true for anybody listening to this call. Like, what's the thing that you don't think you're super great at, but how does that actually inform your superpower?
A lot. Yes. And finding your own personal superpower. So Sarah, tell us how you work with people, where people can find more about you. Tell people a little bit about what you do.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for asking that. I work, as I mentioned, one-on-one with women, predominantly in the area of leadership. So they have an idea of who they are, whether that's self-leadership, whether it's leading a big company, but they have an idea of who they are. Typically, they are related to as strong women, but they don't necessarily see themselves that way. So there's something between who they are and how they see themselves. And so we really explore busting up some of that conditioning that sows self-doubt and really create a powerful place to lead from. Mm-hmm. And you can find me at sarahschneiderco.com. That's really a good launching place. I do have a freebie on there that that inventory exercise that we were talking about, that's on there. And then you can also get to my social media accounts, which I am not that consistent with because it's not my favorite place. So that's why the website's probably the best place to go to if you're interested in connecting or anything.
That's awesome, Sarah. Well, I want to apologize to everyone who's put any of that stuff on you. That is it kind of is stay on lane, like, being toxic person proof, like the idea that anyone once a month, and it's been, marriage and family for you, it's been something for each of us. And I am sorry that anyone has like put that and thought, hey, I should tell her what she should do with her life each month. And I'm sorry for the people who've done that to me in different ways. I just want to like say like, this is just not nice, people. Like, let you be you and let me be me and let the listeners be the listeners. And I want to promote more of that in the world rather than promoting my agenda for your life as if my agenda for your life is right and your agenda for my life is right. That is toxic.
Yeah, it is.
That is really toxic.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for that. And because it definitely gives us it can give us a warped sense of what we're supposed to do with this life of ours, and, I'm fortunate enough to have a lot of people in my life who have supported me and who are my trusted advisors. And so it actually doesn't bother me anymore. Like it used to. Now I'm like, I'm just over here having a good time, like making a difference in the world. Like you do your thing. But I think about the people who don't have that. I think about the people who don't have trusted advisors, and I mean that advisors loosely, right? Like just people who have their back and who will support them. Not everybody has that, and those are the people that I often think of that don't have somebody to say, hey, that's actually it's not okay for people to talk or treat you that way, and I hope you know that it's not okay, right? Like not everybody has that, and I wish they did.
Well, and sometimes I think it becomes so commonplace for people to be in your business telling you how you should live your life that I just kind of wanted to like, because as you were saying it, like my emotional reaction was just like, ugh, that's despicable. Like, why would one people tell you should have children? Like, what? Like, that is so inappropriate. Obviously, I teach boundaries for a living as part of what I do. It's like, whoa, that's really horrible that they are so egotistical in their own choices that they think they should tell you how to, like, you should do something as like not as crazy as having children, because I have children, but as like life-changing as having children. And, when we can start recognizing like, oh, people shouldn't be doing that to each other. Like that is, and I don't like to use the should word, but I'll use it on that one, and it becomes like, wow, that's really inappropriate that people are telling you what you should and not be doing with your body and choices. And because people in my own life have done that, right? And it's different choices and different things, but it has been painful for me. It has been toxic for me. It has been damaging for me. Not that and I do like to couple that with the idea of trusted advisors, because I know what you're saying. What I'm saying is it doesn't mean you never listen to anyone else and you're like, I am woman, hear me roar. I do whatever the heck I want. That's not the energy. Like but it is a balance of this is where I start and this is where I stop and this is where you begin. And when you're bumping over into my lane about my life choices, you're in the wrong, not me. Right?
Yeah. I like this is where I start and this is where you start, right? Like it's such a cool way to think about it, and that can shift, right? Like I think about it as a bubble. Like I can bring that closer to me and let you closer to me. I can move it out and move like it doesn't mean, because I always have to be careful that I don't put because my go-to can be a wall if I get scared or if I feel confronted. Like I can I can get people to go away very quickly if I need to, which again I learned that to navigate the world sometimes. But I've also done a lot of work to be like, hey, I can also let people in. I can actually shift where I start and you start. So I love the way that you said that, because I can see how that's evolved for me over the last few years, especially of like, it's not I could be a one woman show, but I don't want to be. Like, that's also not something I want to be in the world.
Have you seen that Willy Wonka, like the old Willy Wonka, like the bubbles, like Charlie?
Oh, yeah.
Age. Okay, yeah. So, because when you use the bubble analogy, I thought about like not like walling up, because then that gets defensive and it's a defensive, like protective energy, which it's not my favorite energy, but I've used it plenty in my own life. I think of it like Willy Wonka and like they're all in the air and there's bubbles around. You just kind of like waft them away. It's like a very gentle, like, that is none of your business. Thank you. Have a good day. That is none of your business. Ooh, I like that idea, right? It's kind of this wafting rather than like that wall protective energy.
Yeah. I love that. And who doesn't like bubbles? I mean, they're so much fun.
Right? Oh, Sarah, this has been so fun. Thank you. Any last words of wisdom for us? If you had like one message to give to the world, what would it be?
I love that.
Throw
Making
down.
me choose one thing all day today. I love it. I like the challenge. Well, first, I want to just thank you for having me on, and I so appreciate you and others who have podcasts, because you don't like, it takes time and energy and love. Like, you don't have to have podcasts, and you do. So it takes something. So thank you for that. Thanks for having me on. And I would say the thing I would leave people with is really get that you have something to offer the world. It may look different than somebody else's. It may talk and present itself differently. It may not be part of the supposed to's or shoulds that you learn, but it matters.
I love it. It matters and you matter, right? Awesome. Well, Sarah, thank you for helping us on our journey to becoming toxic person proof.
Thanks, Sarah.